we have Jeanne from the other side of the ocean joined us. Hello.
Hello, how are you this morning? Or this afternoon, I guess. It's morning here.
Oh, we have already
The evening,
in
and
the evening.
as you see, it's dark already here.
And the bags are already appearing of the long day, long marathon. You can successfully finish it for us.
That sounds great.
You are going to talk about automations. We have talked about automations already somewhat, but we say that automating everything is really, really important. So we are really eager to see you.
Great. All right. Can you see my first slide?
Yeah.
Yes.
Great. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to be here and speak with you all. I'm really excited. Thanks to everyone for attending. One of my favorite things to do is talk about email marketing. So this is at the top of that list. I am just coming off a cold, so my voice is still a little hoarse and I may cough a little bit. So please bear with me. I'm doing the best I can. But yeah, we're going to talk about automation today. For those of you who aren't familiar with me, my name is Jeanne Jennings. I'm the founder and CEO of my own boutique consulting firm, email optimization shop. I'm also the general manager of Only Influencers, which is the original community of email industry professionals. And I'm the programming chair of the OI annual conference, the Email Innovation Summit, which takes place in Vegas every year. This year, we're going to be there June 19th to 21st. It's at a lovely resort called Red Rock in the desert. It's not on the strip. And if you'd like to come to Vegas, use my code Jennings EIS23 to save 20% on your registration. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Just do me a favor, let me know you were in the session today. And feel free to follow me on Twitter. All right. So one of the first things I always get asked is, well, why would I want to automate email? What is the point of that? Well, there's a lot of reasons. The first is that when you automate email, it allows you to collect what we call passive income. So what that means is your staff on a daily basis doesn't have to do anything for those emails to go out because they're automated. And done properly, they're going to be bringing in revenue for you, even though your staff isn't spending, after they set them up, isn't spending much time on it. So that would be the first reason to do automation. Excuse me. The second reason is that it's going to free up time. So again, when you automate emails, they're going to go out without your staff having to hit the send button or set anything up. So it frees your staff up. That doesn't mean you need less staff. That means it frees them up to do more high value things. So it gives them more time to work on things that actually matter in your business. The third point is, done properly, automated emails provide increased relevance. So let's think about probably the most common automated email, the abandoned cart email. When you send an abandoned cart email, that's highly relevant to the recipient. You're focusing on things that they've put in their cart, but then they walked away. They were obviously interested in the products. So the increased relevance is really what makes the automation successful, because you're able to trigger it at the appropriate time. The same thing with browse abandonment emails. Someone's been looking at something, but they didn't put it in their cart. If you know who they are, you can send them an email and hopefully pull them back to the site. What all these things kind of add up to for automated emails, and Adiola touched on it in her presentation, which was excellent, by the way, performance. So according to, this is from, oh, I don't have the source on here. Anyway, automated email triggers are almost 500% more effective than batch emails. Higher conversion rates, higher click-through rates. Again, that is because of the high relevance. So that is the other reason that people love automated emails, because they really, really work well if they're done properly. This is actually a slide I did for a client back in 2015, which, oh my goodness, was like 8 years ago. Basically, automation is really the future of email marketing. This is really where we're headed. You can see for this client, we had a prospect journey. They were actually selling test prep materials. So for instance, if someone wanted to take the SAT or the GMAT, which are common tests that you need to take here in the United States to get into college, to get into graduate school, you have to take a standardized test. They were selling materials for people to take those tests. So we had a finite amount of time to sell them because we knew when the next test was scheduled for, and they needed to get the test prep in a certain amount of time before that test. So by looking at that, we were able to look at the typical prospect journey and work out emails that are triggered by their actions, which are the green ones, emails that are triggered by our send schedule, which are the blue ones, and set up a system that would just kind of go. We built in things like we found that people who attended their webinar were much more likely to purchase. So we made sure we did 2 webinars a month, and we made sure that we tried to get people into them. But this sort of shows the future and the promise of email marketing. Now, this doesn't mean that you don't need staff doing email marketing. What this means is that staff is freed up rather than having to work on triggering that reactivation campaign. It'll be triggered automatically. Your staff can just be spending time A/B split testing and optimizing each of these efforts to make sure they become more and more effective as time goes on. Now, the one concern about all this, I'm going to open this there. Now I can see the chat. So is this quote from Bill Gates, which I absolutely love. The first rule of any technology is that automation applied to an efficient operation will magnify that efficiency. Very true. That's what we're trying to do. But if you apply it to an inefficient operation, it won't work. And that's why we want to make sure that we've really set up our automations with great content and a lot of thought behind them so that they're going to be efficient systems. Because just automating an email that doesn't work isn't going to make the email work better. All right. So where do you start? Let's say that you don't have any automations, or maybe you have a few. Where do you start with this process? My recommendation for clients, we always start automating emails closest to the final goal, and then we work our way up the funnel. So what does that mean? A typical sales funnel has awareness, consideration, decision, and then finally a conversion, which is your goal. So using this methodology, we would start closest to the conversion and work our way up the funnel. So why would we do this? Well, right down there, right close to the conversion, typically is an abandoned cart email. Maybe it's a talk to a rep email if you're in the B2B world. But if we can get a 10% increase in conversions from that abandoned cart email, meaning people buying things, that has an immediate direct impact on our bottom line. That's money in our pocket. It's unlikely you're going to get that from a 10% increase up at the awareness stage. You're too far from that final action. So that's why we start at the bottom, because if we optimize from the bottom, then everything we do after it will take advantage of that optimization at the bottom. This is also a great way to start throwing off more money, which gives you money to build things like your browse abandonment campaign, which would come in that consideration stage. It gives you time to build things like your welcome series, which would come up at that awareness stage. So that's the first thing we do. We try to start where we're going to get the most bang for our buck, which is down toward the bottom of that funnel. A lot of people want to start at the top and go through the process the way a user would. Not the best way to do things. Start at the bottom and work backwards. This is an example. I know you were also talking to Adiola about testing, which is one of my very favorite things to do with clients. In fact, most of my business is based on A/B split testing. So when I work with a client, we pretty much immediately put in an A/B split testing plan, and we're testing, if not on every send, we're doing at least 1 or 2 tests every week. So this is an example. This is actually an abandoned cart campaign that was going out. It was being done manually. So literally, it only went out when this junior person on the marketing team had a little extra time on a Friday afternoon. And then she would manually pull the names of people who had carts, put it into the email system. They didn't have any way to customize the emails with what products were in the person's cart. It was really a very low-end cart abandonment system. But what we found is it was generating an average of $18 in revenue for every email that they sent. You heard that right. Every single email that they sent was they were earning an average of $18 for that. Now think about your email program. What kind of a rock star would you be if you could earn $18 for every email that you sent? You'd be pretty successful. So the idea is that it was really a no-brainer to automate this program. It took a little bit of integration work, but we were able to do that. And then that junior person, it didn't depend on if she didn't have time in a week, it didn't matter. All these things still went out, and they actually went out in a more timely manner. So this is a place where automation really makes a lot of sense. And this really helped their bottom line from day one, because just automatically In fact, it actually it was generating, I think, when I left them, more than $18. Okay, number 2, set a SMART goal for each of your automation campaigns. Hopefully you're familiar with SMART goals. They are goals that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timed. If you're not familiar with this concept, just Google it. There's a lot out there written about it. It's really important to do this. So here are some examples. This is a case study from one of my clients. So case studies from various clients. If you don't have a goal, how are you going to know if you've succeeded? So for instance, for a cart abandonment series, your goal might be to drive at least 10% of recipients to return and complete their purchase within 3 days of the cart abandon. For a top of funnel lead nurture series, your goal might be to entice at least 15% of recipients to download at least one white paper within a 6-week period. So make sure you put those things in, make sure the goals are SMART, and make sure you have something that you're goaling toward. We're going to talk later about reporting on your series. If you don't have a goal, it makes it really hard to report on it because you don't know what you're looking for success. So make sure you've got SMART goals. Okay, don't automate just one email. This is probably one of the more controversial ones, but you're going to see it's actually super important. So multi-effort campaigns are going to increase your ROI. So let's think about this. You've got, on average, let's say a 25% open rate for your emails. This is actual open rate. This doesn't take into account MPP opens, which are fake opens. So this is true opens from a human. Probably have about a 2.6% click-through rate on average. Typically, it probably takes about an hour to create an additional email once you have like a series in place. This is another case study from a client. This is why you don't send just one. On that first email, we did pretty well. This is amount of revenue, unique revenue for each email. But on that second email, we actually had a send over send increase of revenue of 128%. So we more than doubled our revenue on that second send. Third send, we got 16% more revenue in. Fourth send, 35% more. Fifth send, 18% more. If you think about it, with that 25% open rate on average, that means that 3 out of 4 people aren't going to open that first email. With that click-through rate, great percentage of people are not going to be clicking on that first email. So by adding extra emails into the mix, what you're able to do is increase your reach on that email. And when you increase your reach, you're going to increase your revenue. So I've got a question. How do you determine true opens? It's a very good question. A lot of the ESPs now are parsing out the MPP opens. I've got to be honest, it's not a 100% solution, because I actually have a client now where we're showing more unique clicks than unique opens, which obviously can't happen. The point here is that it's not so much looking at your true opens, it's just showing you that by sending additional efforts, you're going to get more people to open those emails. Also, I have a question. How do you see automation becoming possible in the future when GDPR requires consent for statistics, which the user probably does not want to give? So that's probably a little outside of the scope of this. But the key is to get that opt-in permission. And I would say we're going to need to start getting opt-in for GDPR as well, if you're not doing that. I worked with a lot of clients when GDPR came into being and helped them get GDPR ready. And so the key is just to keep following the regulations. All right. Feel free to use the chat for questions. I may cover some of them during the session. I may hold some of them till the end. Next recommendation, outline key messages for your automated series. This is really important. We talked about sending multiple efforts. The idea isn't to send the same message over and over and over again. That's actually a recipe for unsubscribes and spam complaints, and we don't want either of those. So the idea is to come up with your key messages, and then each email has a different key message, but builds on the first. And together, those are going to drive the action that you need toward your goal. So again, here's a case study. This is work I did for the General Services Administration, part of the US government. There was something called ARRA funds, which they allocated couple years ago during a recession to try to move the economy. So all of a sudden, all the procurement officers in the US government had additional funds that they had to spend, but there were guidelines around them. They had to spend them quickly. They had to make sure they got the maximum value for that money. They need to make sure the money was distributed transparently, and they needed to make sure that they could, there was accountability, so there was no waste or fraud or anything else. So what we did is we actually built an email marketing campaign around these 4 requirements, telling them how GSA, my client, could help them meet all 4 of these. And so this became the crux of our automated series. Whenever I do automated series, I always have my key messages, and then I usually bookend it with an email at the beginning that talks about all 4 and kind of introduces the series, and an email at the end that again reiterates all 4 and kind of ends the series. So this is the key to success. You don't send the same message over and over again. You take different angles, because one person's hot button may be speed, someone else's hot button may be value. And so you want to make sure that you have time to talk about each of these things. It would be too much for one email. Spreading it out over a series of emails makes it much more effective. Better way to deliver it. All right, report on your automation series as a whole. This is one of the big things that I see companies missing out on, but it really helps you understand what's going on with your series. So you want to look at individual efforts, but you also want to look at aggregate performance of the series. So in this case, the bars are conversion rate. That is conversion rate from sent, not from click, from sent, which is the one you want to use when you're evaluating a program. The line is the click-through rate, the CTR, the unique click-through rate on clicks. And you can see here, each of these numbers is effort number 1, effort number 2, effort number 3. So you see how they each did individually. At the far right, you can see aggregate, how we did for this series. So aggregate for these series, the total unique clicks, 2% of the audience clicked on at least one email, and the conversion rate was 5.8%. So 5.8% of the folks ended up converting. So very important to look at things individually, but also all together. Another way that you can do that, excuse me, let me take a little water break, is with reach rates. If you're not calculating reach rates on your multi-effort series, this is the time. You can even calculate reach rates on all of your series that went over the course of a week or a month. There's a million different ways to use reach rates. What reach rates cover is how many unique people took the action on each email in the series. So for instance, the first send, this many unique people converted, whereas this higher bar clicked. And the second, and you can see it goes up. So this is the cumulative number of unique people that took each of these actions. Just to try to make that clear, here's a little example. So let's say you send your first email. Let's say people named Pam and Mark and Madison clicked on it. That's 3 unique clickers. So your click reach is 3. Let's say you send a second email. Pam, Mark, and Eric clicked on it. So Pam and Mark had already clicked on the first one, so they're not unique clickers, but Eric is a new clicker, so he is a unique clicker. So now your click reach is at 4. You can see how that goes. So you're basically looking at the unique people who clicked on any email in the series, as opposed to unique people who clicked on just one email in a series. Reach rate really is a great way to take a look at your multi-effort series, whether they're automated or not. So try that. All right. Keep it simple. This is really important. A lot of times when I go into work with clients, they've spec'd out some automations that they want to do. Sometimes it's a single map that takes up half a wall that has all of these different automations springing out from everywhere. That's the point where you break them into manageable bites and you're agile and you build them. But really, complicated doesn't equal more effective. It's better to start with a simple automation, something you can build quickly, get in place, see how it works. You can always add to it from there. The key is getting started simple and then testing into everything you add on to build it. There's nothing worse than building a really big, complicated automation and then it doesn't work. and you spend all this time and all this money and all this effort, and then you're not really sure why it's not working, start small, get something that works, and then add on to it as you go. Much better way to go. Optimize. This is, again, bread and butter of my business, what I do with clients, but, and I love that a lot of the questions went around testing and scientific method. You really should be testing at least once a week. If you're a frequent sender, once a month is good if you're not a frequent sender, but it's important to test in a smart way. Just if you want to use smart metrics, you want to test in a smart way. So you want to observe what's going on. You want to take a look at what's going on with your series, and then you want to come up with some hypothesis about how you can make it perform better. That's really important. You don't just want to test the color of the button just because. One of my favorite examples is I had a client where all the buttons were red. It was a financial advisory service. And when I got to thinking about it, red is being in the red financially is bad. Red is the color of stop signs in the United States. When you're at a stoplight, red means stop. So psychologically, there's a lot to the color red. We changed the buttons to green because green is the color of money. Green is the color of go. And we saw a lift in performance. So that was a color test that we did, but we had a very sound hypothesis behind it. And that's the kind of stuff that you want to come up with for your tests. Once you have your hypothesis of what will improve performance, you want to test that hypothesis and see if it's true. You want to make sure you design a very clean test so you can get a clean read on that element. Then you want to analyze your results. We already went over how you analyze. Well, you want to do lift rates. You want to make sure it's statistically significant, just like Adiola was talking about so much of her presentation. I totally support and agree with. And then you want to apply those findings to future emails, and then the process just continues. So make sure you're using scientific method. Make sure you're testing into those changes that are going to boost your performance. The final tip I have for you today, and I think we're going to have about 5 minutes for questions, is let me know how it goes. Give some of these tips a try it with your program, and then, shoot me an email. Let me know how it's working out. Now, before I leave, I wanted to leave you with some additional resources. Once again, I've got my own consultancy. I also have a blog and a free email newsletter. We not only cover the articles that I publish on my blog and elsewhere, we also cover the other things around the email industry that we love. We often cover Kath Pay's stuff and Ediola's stuff. So please sign up. We also, at Only Influencers, have a blog and a free email newsletter. Kath and Adiola actually write for our blog on Only Influencers. So that's a great resource. We have about 23 other people in the industry who write for that blog. Again, sign up for that newsletter. You'll get everything that appears on our blog. You'll also get information about other webinars and other resources from around the web. And then please, 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 if you can make it to Las Vegas, join us for the conference. Kath is speaking. We have a lot of other great speakers. I'm speaking. It's going to be a great, great 3-day session. And you can save 20% on registration with that code, Jennings EIS 23. And I think we have time for some questions. Thanks so much for joining. Let me know what questions you got.
Thank you, Jeanne. It was really interesting. For me, the scientific method was a little bit eye-opening because I have seen a lot of clients test for just everyone tests, but if the next time I show them, you should have a hypothesis about what do you want to test and how it should work, then maybe they think a little bit more about the reason why people should test anyway all the time. So yeah,
Yep.
it was a nice new angle on the things. But we have some questions from the chat also regarding GDPR. I think you already answered something, but I have a question about GDPR myself too. Well, since email is an international medium, you could say, but behind every email address is a physical person who is a resident of some country. So basically, the laws of that country would apply to this email address. If I'm an Estonian, then Estonian the law applies to the content that is sent to me. So GDPR is relevant with me as a private person. we see a lot of browse abandonment tools appear, especially in e-commerce. But But in regards to GDPR, it shouldn't be illegal because, first of all, you would have to ask me first if you can
Right.
track me when I'm
It
browsing
de-
around. So how should businesses
yeah.
comply with this? But
The key, what you're really talking about
yeah,
is whether it's a third-party cookie or whether it's first-party data. That's really the difference, right? Because if it's a third-party cookie and you don't have any relationship with the brand whose website you're on, then yeah, that's not GDPR compliant for them to send you an email because they got that data from a third party who had the person's data. So yeah, that's completely, I'm not a big fan of those services. Most of the clients that I work with are, well, yeah, most of the clients I work with are completely opt-in. So the key to success there is getting that first party data. So for instance, let's talk about Amazon, right? When I go to Amazon, I'm logged in on Amazon. They know who I am because I'm logged in. And so that's what you need to do with your clients. That way, if you see the person and it's first party data that they've browsed something, you can send them an email because you've got that relationship, that first party permission. So that's really a data permission. And I'm totally down with that. And it's not just GDPR, even here in the States with my clients, the third party email, if you don't have a relationship, it's not going to work as well. You're going to have an increased risk of spam complaints and increased risk of compliance issues. It's just not a good idea to email someone that you don't have a relationship with in any context.
yeah, but usually SMEs, they don't seem to care
Care.
so much.
It's
Big,
okay not to care. You just need to understand the business risk. I mean, and that's really the key, right? Because if the government is going out and enforcing these laws and regulations, then as a small to medium business, you really should comply. I mean, most of my clients, quite honestly, are big companies. They care a lot about their reputation. They care a lot about compliance. They go above and beyond what the law requires here in the States, as they should. So if there's someone who's a small business and they feel like they don't want to comply, I guess that's their business, but I would never advise them to do that. And they're definitely, I mean, it's a business risk question. What is your level of risk you're willing to take for your business, and what is the downside? Um,
Usually the technologies go a little bit faster than regulations can follow them. So we have already all the tools, but yeah, probably there need to be some kind of like a court practice based on those things, and then tools will adapt, or the
yeah,
businesses will adapt.
Yeah, I mean, in the States, our CAN-SPAM law came into being in 2003. It does not require an opt-in. You can literally email anyone whose email address you get. But, I've been consulting since 2001, and the companies that I work with, they don't do that. They have a much higher standard. They need to get an opt-in. They want to get an opt-in. And that's really the key for success in their business and the key to success in email marketing. Just because it's legal doesn't mean it's a best practice.
Well, it's the rule of thumb of email marketing. You will have to, well, the best subscribers in the list are those who want to be there in the first place. Yeah.
Right. I've actually done case studies and I've published a bunch of them on my blog, but opt-in lists perform like 25 times better than non-opt-in lists, 16 times better. And you can look them up. I have, I have had a couple clients over the years that had both kinds of lists, and sending them the same types of messages. Opt-in just works better. And so it's worth it to put the effort in to get an opt-in list.
Totally agree. There is also a question about how do you determine true opens? It was in the middle somewhere where you tracked opens, but
Yeah. So you could never, ever, ever identify true versus false opens. Open rate has always had a margin of error because there were people who would read entire emails without enabling images. They wouldn't trigger an open, even though they'd read it in detail 3 times. And there were other people who would scroll past it in their preview pane with images enabled, and it would trigger an open, even though they didn't look at it. So there's always been a margin of error in opens. With Apple's MPP coming into play, what they did is by pre-opening every email that comes to an Apple device, they've increased that margin of error exponentially. So, with open rates, they were never an absolute metric like click-through rate is. They've always had a margin of error. They still have a margin of error. You should not spend your time trying to come to true open rates. That is a holy grail quest. That is a theoretical quest, and it just doesn't matter. For most email programs, what really matters is a conversion rate and revenue generated, traffic to the website. Those are the things that you should focus on. Most ESPs, those are business metrics, and those are the KPIs that you should use for your programs. Diagnostic metrics like open rates and click-through rates show you how people are interacting or not with your message. They can give you clues of what levers you can pull to increase your business metrics. But anyone who's spending a whole lot of time worrying about open rates and trying to figure out a true open rate, I got to tell you, you need to let go of that. You've never been able to get there. You're not going to be able to get there. And truthfully, it just doesn't matter.
Amen to that.
Okay, you told that you're mostly working with the big companies. So, but if we are thinking that, let's say, probably our clients most are like small and medium-sized companies.
Yes.
That and if we are looking, this automation logic is absolutely strategical and based on facts, statistics, etc., etc. What do you think? Is this is this just the playground for the big companies, or in some way or in some level, smaller companies will adapt or will take this also considering? Because as many of previous speakers told, that they just don't have time, resources, etc. to do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd love to be a marathon runner, but I don't have the time or the resources to do it. So I don't have that as a goal. But here's the thing about email. Email has it is very inexpensive to do, and it's not that difficult to make a profit on your email marketing campaigns. But that's a double-edged sword. So too many people are like, you know what, the email's profitable. I'm just gonna let it go, and I'm gonna put my money into trying to figure out how to make social profitable. When really what they should do is they should just put a little more effort into email, because the thing about email is if you put a little more resources, and it's not even money so much as it is time into it, you can increase the output that you get exponentially. You can get a 50% lift in revenue or 100% lift in revenue. So it's not just for big companies. I would say the key with small companies is just, if they can't afford to hire a consultant, they're just going to need to spend a little more time reading up on it. Things like the Only Influencers blog, things like my blog, that give them ideas of things to test and things they can do to improve performance. So that is really the key, is just like anything, you've got to work at it. I may never be a marathon runner, but if I get out there and start doing, a half mile and then a mile and a mile half a day, I could probably work myself up to a 5K. And so I think that's what small businesses need to think about. They need to figure out within the limitations that they have, how they can make their email marketing more effective. And the key is that if you keep saying, wow, I'd really like to be able to run a 10K, but you never get yourself outside in a pair of running shoes and start, you're never going to be able to run a 10K.
Exactly.
Okay, I have actually one more question.
All right.
So, as you are doing the consultancy and you are explaining all this automation stuff and how to build automations, how to build up the strategy, what kind of automations you have to have, and how they must work, etc., etc., etc. So, but as time goes by, we are seeing all those platforms who is like, okay, there is one big red button, what is doing everything. It's doing this automation, that automation, this
Pre-built
automations.
pre-built templates for everything. You will just have to input your company name and press start, and it would work out of the box. Do you believe in this?
It's probably better than nothing. You know, there's a blog that I'm about to publish on the OI blog, and it's interesting. It's one of our members, and they went through and they actually worked with AI to create an email. And it's a fine email. It's better than no email. But is it a really good, compelling email? No. And so, you know, I know companies like that are out there, and it's better than nothing. But you can only go so far with generic. So if you're a really small business and you're really strapped, it's probably worth trying those things, yes. But it all depends on how good the people who put that together were, right? Do they know standards and best practices? How are they using images? Is it good copy? Is it hitting on the high points? But again, it's going to be generic. And so there are going to be limits to how successful it can be, but it's probably better than nothing.
All
Maybe
right.
you could start with that, and then you could use some time to, over time, customize it and make it more your own. Because that's really what matters. Like I said, it's really about the content. And so a message that talks about the features, benefits, advantages of having an email relationship with your company is much better than a generic welcome message. And that just goes through with any email you send, even if it's not an automation.
Okay.
Yes.
So,
Okay. Thank you, Jeanne. Your presentation concludes our Masters of Email Marketing. Thank you for coming from so far. And we wish you all the best in Las Vegas. Unfortunately, we cannot come.
Maybe next year.
Maybe next year, yes. And thank you for everyone who listened. Thank
who
you
is
for,
still with us?
yes, the last brave ones who are still with us. Thank you for good questions. As said, we will upload the video to our YouTube channel and send an email with links to presentations and all the information probably on Monday. And
And for the next, so it's gonna be in autumn, and it's gonna be 12 hours of email marketing.
oh, luckily, not 24.
Yeah.
I was already afraid.
And we probably will have more than 10 speakers. Half of them will be generated by AI.
Yeah, probably. Join our newsletter, smiley.com/newsletter, and thanks. See you.
Thanks.
Bye.
See you. Bye.